First Church, it is good to be with you today. Thank you, Jeremy, for your story, and thank you, choir, for that beautiful anthem. Who is included in your vision for the future? Who is not included? 15 years ago, I had the great pleasure of being part of a workshop with the Harlem Gospel Choir. At the time, I directed a predominantly white college choir, and my students wanted to learn the tips and tricks to perform songs from the Black gospel tradition with an authentic sound. The lead educator from the group paused and responded. First, she said, everyone here has a master's degree in vocal performance from prestigious conservatories. That made some sense to me. It's really hard to sound great if you don't know how to sing. Then she said, please understand that all of us have been singing this repertoire our whole lives. That made sense to me too. You can't fake the 10,000 hours to get to excellence. But then she said something that still sticks with me. The most important thing, of course, is that we believe what we're singing. In our bones, we give thanks to God for the blessing of praising His holy name with our voices. Ah, right. That one caught me. In that moment, I saw the difference between academic tourism and authenticity. Are you dabbling at this, or is this central to who you are? Do you know in your bones that what you are saying is real and true? This month we're thinking about justice and equity, and this Sunday we're discussing our vision for the future. When we gather here together in community, we're working towards something, some vision for the future, and that vision surely has something to do with justice and equity. So I ask you, what is your vision for a just and equitable future? There's a term that folks like to use a lot in Unitarian Universalist circles when we talk about such a vision: beloved community. For example, in our denominational work toward an eighth principle, Dr. Paula Cole-Jones and others define the term like this: beloved community happens when people of diverse racial, ethnic, educational, class, gender, abilities, sexual orientation, backgrounds, and identities come together in an interdependent relationship of love, mutual respect, and care that seeks to realize justice within the community and in the broader world. That sounds like a perfect Unitarian Universalist vision for the future. It's a circle wide enough to include everyone, working interdependently, centering love to realize justice. I think I'm done here. Okay, well, I should add this. The term beloved community entered the popular lexicon through Reverend Drs. Howard Thurman and Martin Luther King Jr. Dr. King didn't think of beloved community as some imaginary utopia where lions and lambs dwell together. It was, and I'm quoting, a realistic, achievable goal that could be attained by a critical mass of people committed to and trained in the philosophy and methods of nonviolence. King didn't imagine for a second that there wouldn't be conflict. Of course there's conflict. Only that we all together make a mutual, determined commitment to nonviolence. Nothing but peace is enough. It's amazing, really, that Dr. King could hold on to that commitment when so many people were so aggressively and violently threatening him every day. From where could Dr. King draw so much spiritual strength? Well, he believed that the way to this process of beloved community was through agape love, which he described as the love of God operating in the human heart. Agape is a Greek word from Christian theology, and I bring this up because I want to name the risk in claiming Dr. King's vision without claiming his faith. The risk in claiming his vision without claiming his faith. Martin Luther King was an ordained minister in the Baptist Church. Reverend Dr. King drew deep strength from a firm belief in God's love. And there's a difference in trying to enact the practices of beloved community as a curious seeker and enacting the practices because you know with every fiber of your being that God desires ever-flowing streams of justice. Do you feel that? The difference. In other words, as that educator in the Harlem Gospel Choir said, the most important thing is that we believe what we're singing. You are and have always been a questioning people, and for that I am deeply grateful. But without that something in your bones to hold on to, it is hard to stay the course in the storm. It is hard to stay focused on the work when it gets difficult, unpopular, or dangerous. When we took that moment just a moment ago to imagine our just and equitable futures, we might have imagined a list of things that we want to see in that future. Ecological sustainability, or enough food for everyone, or restorative justice. But remember that the term beloved community is a process, not a way of being. It's not a set of achievable goals. If nothing else, one of the immediate problems of thinking about your hoped for and bespoke future as a set of achievable items is that your vision and my vision won't align. Your vision probably includes cats, and I'm allergic to cats. I like them, they just make me sneeze. But jokes aside, let me ask you the hard question. Where do all the folks that think differently than you go in your dreamed for future? Who is included in your vision for the future, and who's excluded? The activist and writer Adrienne Marie Brown writes, when we imagine the world we want to shift towards, are we dreaming of being the winners of the future? Or are we dreaming of a world where winning is no longer necessary because there are no enemies? Do you dream of defeating the 70 to 80 million people who vote differently than you? Or are you imagining a world where we stop treating one another as opponents? This may be the hardest part of Unitarian Universalism. If we accept that everyone is fully worthy and we see ourselves as inextricably linked one to another in this web of existence, how are we supposed to sit with folks who hate us or with folks who we hate? If I am an Israeli citizen and my sister is murdered in the Hamas attack on October 7th, I have no difficulty imagining how I would ball my hand into a fist and seek vengeance. On a personal level, so mad that my sister was murdered, but I would also feel rage at an organization dedicated to the destruction of my people. And if I'm a Palestinian citizen and I had to flee my home with my wife and son to avoid bombings, and then I settle into a refugee camp where I'm barely surviving, and then my son is murdered in a bombing as collateral damage, I have no difficulty in imagining how I would ball my hand into a fist and seek vengeance. On a personal level, I would be so mad that my own child was murdered, but I would also feel so much rage toward a horrifying war against my people. If I spend enough time thinking about any one person's experience, I can feel the urge for vengeance It's an evolutionary programmed desire to respond tit for tat, eye for an eye, tooth for a tooth. Beloved community, the commitment from everyone to nonviolence and collaborative work, that seems crazy and foolish and a dream. And yet, you and I, we've also known some measure of love, some touch of grace, some unexpected compassion in our own lives. I can see that we're not going to walk the path of beloved community with balled fists. Beloved community, by definition, only happens after we all learn to open our palms. I'm not there yet. Let me tell you how not there I am. Yesterday, I finished this sermon, and I went out to the grocery store, and there's that guy in the center of the aisle who turns his cart to ponder the cereal, creating a traffic jam in both directions, as if for the first time realizing that Fruity O's and Fruit Loops are the same cereal. And no one can move. And for a moment, I had this thought that maybe we're wrong about universal salvation. Maybe this man's going to hell. So no, I do not have agape love for everyone yet. And I don't think I'm alone in this room with that. Oh, I see in myself and in you love and compassion for others, but I want to take this moment to acknowledge in myself and in everyone else our capacity for anger and vengeance. For today, at least, I'm trying to foster curiosity, knowing that it could lead to compassion. So with whoever I am most mad at on any given day, my spiritual practice this year is to meditate until I arrive at curiosity. I tried that loving kindness meditation that we just did. Ideally, I want to arrive at some deep compassion. But for today, I'll settle for curiosity if it can move me away from anger. For example, I want to move from what is wrong with you? And I want to move to what happened to you? But then I ask myself if that's not condescending. What happened to you? And I want to move to a compassionate stance. How can I help you? And then I want to make sure that I'm not being condescending. How can I help you? And move into something like, how can you and I co-create something better? My fellow realists in this room, I know that this sounds crazy and foolish and a dream. Nonviolent cooperative process is just not how the world works right now. There are millions of people who vote to take away your right to medical care, or to say that you don't have a right to love who you love, or who deny your authentic gender. There are folks that have a difficult time saying out loud that maybe America has some unresolved issues with racism. So if we are lacking an imagination where we can all work together nonviolently, all sitting at the table, no winners or losers, it's because we don't see it. But I'm inspired by Joanna Macy and Chris Johnstone, who in their book, Active Hope, remind us. They remind us there were abolitionists in the 1700s who said, I know this sounds crazy, and I understand that the entire economies of the colonies in Europe hinge upon the enslavement of millions of people, but we think there's a better way. And they were called crazy and foolish and dreamers until they weren't. Remember that there were advocates fighting for women to have the right to vote in the 19th century, and they were called crazy and foolish and dreamers until they weren't. Remember that there were advocates fighting for children with cognitive or physical differences to have the basic right to go to public school 60 years ago, and they were called crazy and foolish and dreamers until they weren't. I mean, sometimes we are trying to imagine something that is already happening everywhere else. In America, we can't imagine a better way to handle crime than to imprison millions of our fellow citizens, but other countries have already figured out a better way. It always seems crazy and foolish and a dream until it isn't. Thank goodness we have some teachers who have shown us how to do the work. Thich Nhat Hanh was a Buddhist monk in Vietnam who was watching his nation tear itself in two. But he didn't pick a side. Rather, rooted in his Buddhist spiritual practices, he saw everyone as a sibling. And he launched a very dangerous campaign simply called, "Don't Shoot Your Brother." Because of his spiritual practice, he was solid as a mountain, firm as the earth. He was free. Han practiced a revolutionary, radical compassion in the face of danger. And it was crazy, and it was foolish, and it was a dream. Until it wasn't. Reverend Dr. King was a Baptist minister in the Jim Crow South who watched his nation dehumanizing itself. Somehow, he didn't pick sides. Rooted in his Christian agape love, he saw everyone as a sibling and launched a dangerous campaign to restore the soul of the nation through his civil rights work. Because of his spiritual practice, King could look to the mountains from whence came his help. In the midst of very real danger, King practiced a revolutionary, radical compassion, and it was crazy and foolish, and famously, a dream. Until it wasn't. Thich Nhat Hanh and Reverend Dr. King, these were collaborators in this kind of work, this process of beloved community. They had different spiritual traditions, they lived different experiences, they grew up singing different songs. But they agreed that the only way forward was through radical compassion. I look at my hands, and I realize they've mostly only known how to ball into fists. A fighting spirit keeps us alive in a fighting world, yes? I know that if I open my palms, I risk a lot. And of course, I want to acknowledge that what I risk in this body is so much less than what folks in marginalized identities risk. But any of us who open our palms risk. We risk being a chump. We risk getting hurt. Perhaps most of all, we risk letting go of our sense of control over this world. But I know this, I will never sing like the Harlem Gospel Choir by learning a few tips and tricks. If I want to live in a world with less vengeance and more peace, I'm going to have to start believing that this is possible. I know that I will never flourish in this life, never play a part in leaving the world a little bit more compassionate when my time ends, if I keep my fists balled up. And friends, I am certain that we will not arrive at a more peaceful, just, and equitable world until we all take that risk and open our palms to one another. May we have the humility to let go of our bespoke visions of the future, the courage to orient our work toward the process of open-palmed justice-seeking. And may we have that compassionate love for the interdependence of all beings, without which our work will be in vain. May it be so.